Welcome to Round the Table Election Watch. What a night. We have a new Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer. Labour are in power and forming the new government. A lot to discuss and to analyse, and delighted to be joined by Andrea Williams and Tim Dieppe as we discuss and debrief the election results. As always, we would love to hear from you, your questions, your concerns, your hopes about how we can be engaging, what we should be thinking about what has happened and the next 4 or 5 years ahead of us. Hi, Andrea. Hi, Tim.
Hi.
Afternoon.
Tim, I'll come to you first. So Labour, 412 seats, a gain of 211. How would you summarise this election?
Well, I think there are a lot of points to take away, Ben. A lot of points to take away. One is that the vote change didn't shift very much, as you might have thought, for the massive gain of seats for Labour, but not actually very much of a gain of the share of the vote, and that's quite interesting. In fact, they had, I think, a 2% increase in vote share, and that was really all in Scotland, where there was a 17% increase in vote share, which is because of people switching from SNP to Labour. So basically, everywhere else in the country, the share of the vote for Labour was actually down, and they won because of shifting voting away from Conservatives. So it's really about people less voting for Conservatives. It's really about people voting against Conservative, much more than it is anybody voting for Labour or shifting towards Labour. And in fact, 171 of the seats that Conservatives have lost overnight, Reform voters, or the number of Reform votes, is greater than the margin of defeat. So if Reform had combined with Conservatives, as in fact they did last election, you may remember, Conservatives would have won those seats. So really it's about people voting against Conservative, whether they voted Reform or Labour. And the turnout was about 60%, might be a little bit lower, basically the lowest turnout since, I think, 1945, what people are saying. I think we've got the final figures on that yet. So, yes, a massive swing around in MPs, lots and lots of people losing their seats, lots and lots of new MPs there, and now we have a Labour government, supported with a lot of Lib Dems as well, and a massively lower reduced Conservative MPs, and a completely new parliament with a new agenda.
Wow. Andrew, what do you think this election really is telling us?
Well, that our nation is in a pretty stark and dark place. I think that we've been praying across the weeks during this period of election, and we've been asking for God to intervene, and there's a sense in which He is sovereign, and this is now a very clear situation that we are to deal with. And I think Michael Pettek puts it quite well there. 2/3 of the seats in the House of Commons on 1/3 of the votes, the most egregious departure from proportional representation in the history of our nation. There is that truth that this amount of seats does not reflect the mood music in the nation. It doesn't really reflect the mood music. But there was
It's not huge celebrations and huge sort of enthusiasm like there was with Tony Blair won in 1997. In fact, Labour have won less votes than I think Blair won in the elections he won.
Less proportion even than Jeremy Corbyn, less proportion of the vote than Jeremy Corbyn. I think that does say something. So it was actually a vote as much against the current political class and against Conservatives. And I want to say there, had the Conservatives really been conservative on social policies, the things that we have been talking about, I believe the picture could well be different.
Well, that's part of the thing. People have protested against Conservatives, haven't they? And they've gone for reform. A lot of the Conservative votes, I think, have gone for reform. And part of the reason they've gone for reform is because Conservatives have broken their promises too many times, particularly on immigration, but also on not really standing up properly to the transgender ideology and stuff like that.
And introducing same-sex marriage, so redefining the family. I mean, that's
Yeah.
all, and this very, very liberal education in our schools and so on, and the general sort of malaise and sadness that we have. So what we have is this brand new parliament full of people that we don't know. So I think we have to, I mean, who are they? Who are these new Labour MPs? Hundreds of them. Over 200 of them. This actually is an opportunity, church, to get to know them, to pray for them, and to tell them what we believe and how we work in our communities, and how we want them to vote. I think that we have to be very alive to that at this particular point. And unless we do, church, what I want to say just generally is that we're going to be facing policies that are very dark indeed. Remember now that the Liberal Democrats are very buoyed, they're very excited. They've got 70 votes, and they are more left in social policies, more liberal than the Labour Party.
Yes. So
that is very concerning, and it's why we need to get back to work immediately in terms of telling those that are newly elected what the church stands for and believes in.
We'll get into some of those concerns and things that we should be engaging with over these next few years in a moment. Tim, one of the things that you had been warning about ahead of the election was the potential impact of the Muslim vote. Tell us, now that we have the results, what has the impact been?
Yes, well, the Muslim vote is a website that was set up to endorse certain candidates around the country, and to try to encourage Muslims to vote in line with Islamic beliefs and with Islamic priorities. Things like Gaza was featured very, very prominently, and recognizing the state of Palestine and all of those kind of things in their demands. And they feel that a lot of independent candidates across the country, and then also supported some from Greens and some from Lib Dem and one or two others as well. And what's very interesting is independent Muslim vote-backed candidates have won 5 seats. Now, that is more than Reform. I know everyone's talking about Reform winning 4 seats. Well, good for them. But Muslim Vote actually did better. They won 5 seats. And then they also, 5 other MPs that were endorsed by Muslim Vote also won seats. I think that's 3 Greens, 1 Lib Dem, and 1 SDLP who were backed by Muslim Vote won their seats. So that means there's 10 Muslim Vote endorsed, Muslim Vote backed MPs now in Parliament who are going to push for that agenda, which includes, of course, recognising the APPG definition of Islamophobia, which is kind of a blasphemy law in there. It includes things like stopping arms to Israel and recognising the Palestinian state and allowing Muslim prayers in schools, and all of these kind of things are demands of those MPs. So I know people are talking about Reform. What's interesting as well is that Muslim Vote bloc nearly unseated some other people like Wes Streeting, who is in the will be in the cabinet, very prominent Labour MP. His majority was cut right down to 500 by the Muslim Vote. Jess Phillips, her majority cut right down to 600 by the Muslim Vote. In Leicester East, actually, the Conservatives won in a Labour heartland because the Muslim Vote split the vote there. So a lot of shifting. So we're talking about just a minute ago how Reform caused 170 MPs, one could put it this way, Conservative MPs to lose their seats. On the other side, you've had the Muslim Vote, which has also not cost Labour so much, but it has cost Labour some significant seats there. And this is a massive shift, it's a new thing in British politics, that you have Muslim identified and Muslim cause MPs independently standing and winning election.
Actually, so I guess the thing is the key there. The thing is they are actually winning.
Yeah.
And they will be applying pressure. Those MPs will be applying pressure, and and it will apply pressure on other MPs. So people like Wes Streeting and Jess Phillips, they will have been under enormous pressure to concede to the Muslim demands, the Islamic demands in their constituencies, and that Muslim vote is only going to increase and build in the next decade. Where's the Christian vote? Where is that? Where is the in terms of how have we joined together? I mean, very often it's as if Christians laugh at the Christian parties that are coming out on a Christian ticket, saying there's no way that they can ever be elected. It's a waste of a vote, and so on. Whereas in fact, we can see that what the Muslims are doing here is something where they're taking influence and changing the face of Parliament. Because let me say this, in our local councils across the country, in our city councils, they're quite often run, and Tim will be able to speak to this as well some more, but they're run by unashamed Muslims with an Islamic agenda.
Tower Hamlets is run by an Islamic party, and it's actually an Islamic political party that runs Tower Hamlets. And I think one of the mayors there got in trouble for undue spiritual influence, which is actually against the law. Like, you can't tell somebody they might go to hell if they don't vote the right way. And of course they did that, and was actually prosecuted for it. It's not an often used law, because most Christians and others don't tend to say that. But interestingly, one of the demands of Muslim Vote is to remove that law, so they can say, you're not a true Muslim, you will go to hell if you don't vote for me. And I've seen clips where candidates, Muslim candidates, have come very close, if not possibly have breached that law, and they want to get rid of that law. So that's another very interesting development in terms of what happens here. The Islamic influence in politics has suddenly become, suddenly jumped up massively, because we have these 5 independent MPs and who have come up on that, and plus 5 more who are supported by Muslim Vote. Is suddenly massively increased and jumped up from nowhere. Muslim Vote only started organising themselves, I think, in the last 6 months. Was a new initiative, and there we are. It won't surprise me if you start to see a Muslim party arising out of this, that these MPs align themselves to, and then you start to see a new Islamic political party, much like we've seen Reform come as a new party as well. And this is going to continue to influence our politics. Yes, very much.
Is Claire Harbour good comment here. The Muslim vote is so concerning, especially the blasphemy laws and attitude to Israel. Imagine what it will be like in another 4 years. And I guess certainly there might well be the case that these the Muslim vote may well shift Labour in a sense to try and appease and win them back.
Well, Labour's manifesto promised to recognise State of Palestine, to call for immediate ceasefire, and so those things are in there. And then
and the Islamophobia definition.
The Labour Party has already formally adopted, as part of its code of conduct, the APPG definition of Islamophobia, which defines Islamophobia as a type of racism that targets Muslimness or perceived Muslimness. It's a very vague and general definition, and they're talking about introducing a new Race Equality Act. And given that they define Islamophobia as a type of racism, that may well be bringing into law an Islamophobia law, and certainly a lot of the MPs will be pressuring for that, want that, and feel like they need.
Will also just not understand it, will they, Tim? The thing is, again, they won't understand where that will lead. And
although there will be a big campaign about it. There will be a big campaign against it. And I'd just like to remind people, I wrote a report for the Free Speech Union about it with a forward by Richard Dawkins. Just Google it, Free Speech Union, Islamophobia. So other people are concerned about this as well. So there will be a concerted campaign about the free speech issues of it when it comes up. I think it is when rather than if. But we've got 5 years, and we'll see how this goes.
We'd love to hear from you guys. Please do be putting in your comments and your questions. We want to hear from you. What are you concerned about? What are your questions? What can we be doing? I guess one thing's encouraging. Our friends at the Vote Life initiative, they weren't a party, but they were standing as candidates They received 5,276 votes in total. Now, compared to the big parties, it's not that many, but for a grassroots, getting it done, set up 6 weeks ago, really, initiative, I think that's an encouraging amount, and we praise the Lord for the opportunity.
That's across 22 candidates that they managed to stand.
Yes.
In the election, and they managed to send out leaflets to every house in 22 constituencies, which I think is 1 million homes that they managed to put pro-life leaflets into. So well done to them. That's quite an achievement to have done all that. Yes, very short.
Yeah. Well done to Vote Life. But I just want to point this out. I love those guys. But 5,263 votes and no seats. The Muslim vote has got seats. They set up 6 weeks ago. What about a Christian party? What about the Scottish Family Party, for another party? People, what are we doing in terms of how we respond to these sorts of initiatives? Yes, well done, Christian Hacking. Well done, Ruth Rawlins. Well done to the team. Well done to Neil Deep Narain in Scotland. Well done for standing. Well done to the Heritage Party. Well done to the Christian People's Alliance. But where are the Christians? Do we get behind these people? What if we created a Christian vote? Would I be in Parliament? Would Ben be in Parliament? Would you be in Parliament, Tim? Would we be one of the 10 seats?
Well, I guess the issue is, as you said, Andrea, Christians are divided, and wasn't that what we've been saying over the last few weeks? Is too many Christians are sort of refusing to create a hierarchy of issues, and many people are telling Christians, don't create a hierarchy of issues, don't focus on these fringe Christian issues, because you can prioritize things like environment, immigration, NHS, etc. Don't talk about abortion. Don't talk about euthanasia. Don't talk about homosexuality, transgenderism in schools. Those are just fringe Christian issues. We should just engage on a neutral playing ground, because, I don't know, the abuse of our children, mutilating people, deceiving them, killing unborn children, killing the elderly. Those aren't important issues to Christians, are they, Tim?
Well, I mean, obviously they are and should be, and they should be the issues that Christians are voting on. Life issues. What can be more important than whether you get the right to life, let alone the right to vote? So yes, I agree. But the other point to say is that some of the very strong, outspoken Christians in Parliament have all lost their seats. So that would include Fiona Bruce, who is very, very strong on freedom of religion and also on pro-life issues. Miriam Cates, who single-handedly, I think, sort of took on the transgender stuff and made a massive difference in her one term in Parliament that she's had now. And then you've had other people like Steve Baker, Liam Fox, Nick Fletcher, Andrew Lua. All these people have lost their seats. These strong Christians have lost their seats. And so we'll see what happens with that. Now, I gather that Christians on the left are saying that they've got 17, new MPs?
19, I think.
19 new MPs. So that's encouraging. But I know that, for example, in my own constituency, there was a Christian on the left, now new Labour MP. But when he was asked about transgenderism, he's clearly pro self-ID. What kind of Christian is that? What kind of Christian principles is that? So I think there are serious questions to be asked about, what these 17 candidates stand for, and what kind of Christian values they think, what do they think Christian values are, and will they stand for life and for marriage and for family issues? And I'm very concerned that quite a few of them won't.
A few comments coming in. Chris Owen, if Christians all lived in 12 constituencies, we could get Christians elected, but we're spread out and have to influence current MPs. I think that is just a general reality. I think that's why reform...
You see, the interesting point is there that, of course, the Muslims are concentrated, right? Yeah. So the Muslims have very high concentration in certain areas. There are 4 constituencies now which have 50% Muslim vote, more than 50% Muslim vote, and another, dozens that have 40% and more than 30%, and so on as well. And they're very concentrated in certain areas, and there are other areas of the country where there are virtually no Muslims at all. So, this is a situation, Andrea, with, the comparison there is very significant, isn't it? Because the Muslims are concentrated in certain areas, they then get the seats, right? Christians are not concentrated in any areas, really. And that is one big reason why we are not able to coordinate something like the Muslim vote and say, here's the places. The Muslim vote's got a list of all the constituencies where over 10% of the vote is Muslim. Which constituencies we say are like that in Britain? Any? I mean, there probably are some, but there will be none where it's like 50% evangelical Christians. Absolutely, there'll be none like that. So this is a massive difference here. Now, some people are saying, well, this is what we should do now. We need to form Christian communities or Christian towns or Christian localities, Christian boroughs, where the Christians all go and move there and decide they're going to vote in Christian councillors and Christian mayor and Christian MP and basically form a kind of Christian enclave. Well, the Muslims have been doing that, but I don't really expect the Christians to do that. Do you expect that, Andrea? I mean, I don't expect Christians to actually do that.
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't expect that. And we are to be salt and light in all the world. And we are. I mean, we should actually be going and living in some of these Muslim communities. But also, having said that, it would be amazing, wouldn't it? For, let's say in large cities where in cities where you've got large churches, wouldn't it be, that large church could very easily become the majority on a local council. And that impacts what goes into the schools. That would be a very easy thing to do.
If
politically.
they prioritised it and really got everyone engaged and really got everyone behind it, which is a challenge because you need to be teaching your church members about this and teaching them the importance of it, teaching them how to engage in politics. But
if you have hundreds of people in your congregation, for instance, if you have hundreds of people in your congregation, amongst them there might be 10 that would be interested in standing in local elections.
Yeah.
And they should then be foregrounded in front of the congregation as people who are going to stand for Christian virtue in public life. And they have an opportunity to represent, to represent Christ in public life by being a local councillor. That is actually, I believe, a relatively easy thing for the church to do, particularly in major cities where we have large churches. And it's not that everyone needs to be brought into politics, as it were, that kind of politics, but the church can be told it will be great for you to pray for these people, and it would be great for you to vote for these people who are going to stand for Christ in public life. That is something that is doable.
Sandra here saying, when we vote, we should vote for people who uphold Christian values. Christians on the left are weak and lukewarm. As she put earlier, Christian voters can be very selfish. We vote for what we can get for ourselves. We should talk about euthanasia, abortion, etc. I think that's the thing. We just assume we're unwilling to put these issues into the debate, and I think that's why we have admired Vote Life, because they've at least been saying, why are we not talking about abortion? Why are we not? Why is it not on people's radars, and in particular, why is it not on Christians' radar?
Obviously, that's absolutely right. It was amazing that they stood, but our whole life and being at Christian Concern is to try and put onto the church's radar that these issues are important, and they're important in public life, and they're important for evangelism, and they're important in our schools, with this idea that we actually need to culture build around Christ himself, and that needs to be public, and we can't keep the Christian faith private. And when we talk about public faith, it means that we have to go into the institutions, we have to go into the local councils, we have to keep our schools safe, we have to build kingdom businesses, we have to think about kingdom investing, we have to think about kingdom banks, we have to think about how we do social work, we have to think about how we do drug rehabilitation centres, how we do medicine, how we do law. We have to. This is a massive shift in our culture that we're seeing outworked before our eyes. We now have the mechanism for this kind of majority of Labour and Liberal Democrats for the most appalling, potentially appalling and devastating set of legislation that will really undermine Christian truth in this nation.
So it's worth talking about, isn't it, though, the policies that we were concerned about that were in the Labour manifesto. We've discussed Islam already, but Labour did promise to outlaw conversion therapy, and that could outlaw certain types of consensual conversations or prayers. They did have a caveat in there. They did say we still want to allow people to explore their sexual orientation or gender identity. So that's a kind of recognition that there is free speech issues there. But let's note that a lot of the MPs won't be bothered about that, and Lib Dems wanted to just ban it without any caveats whatsoever, and that's 60 plus MPs. So it's very, very likely we get some conversion therapy law, or certainly a proposal to ban conversion therapy in the next Parliament. We've had Keir Starmer. We've gone from a Hindu Prime Minister to, I think, an atheist Prime Minister. Keir Starmer has voiced his express for assisted suicide and said he would want to prioritise a vote on that. And
when he was Director of Public Prosecutions, he actually weakened the law. He weakened the guidelines around whether or not someone would be prosecuted for assisting in a suicide. So his position is clear on that. He also was being very weak around beginning of life.
Yes, I was going to say. So on euthanasia, I expect they've said they'll prioritise putting a vote. So I expect there'll be a vote on that, and I expect that it will very likely go the wrong way. And then on abortion, we've got the Labour MPs who were pushing to decriminalise abortion. It was just sort of halted by the calling of the election. But again, you could see full decriminalisation of abortion with this Parliament. I mean, which would be shocking. Then, of course, VAT on private schools. Scrapping that is a manifesto pledge of Labour. We're trying to say, what about small, tiny Christian schools that struggle to make ends meet? We'll have to try and make that argument, but they're very ideologically encouraged for that. So we'll see where that goes as well. So and there are a whole load of other policies as well, I'm sure, that will come out in the coming months. And we'll see, we'll watch the King's speech, which I think is on the 17th of July, with great interest to see what he promises in that.
So concerns, but there's always a hope, and we always know that Jesus is on the throne, and that somehow in God's sovereignty and in his providence, somehow the Lord is working through all of this. What should we do now, Andrea?
Don't despair. He is on the throne, and we've got to stay strong. We've got to hold together. We have to continue to build our movement as a group of Christians that are passionate about Jesus and making his name known in the public space. So we're going to keep on doing what we're doing. We're going to keep on analysing those policies or anything that comes out, and we will be calling people to action as this new Parliament unfolds. So we want to say, if you're not signed up to receive our emails, please sign up to receive our emails. Tell others about us. Invite us to come and speak at your churches or at your youth groups. Just invite us to come, because we want to come. We want to engage with you. But similarly, love your MP. Yes, love your MP. Get to know your MP. Pray for your MP. Speak to your MP. Show your MP what the church in your local area actually does. And get into a relationship and get to know them and tell them how you would like them to vote on these very important issues that are going to occur. So let's not despair, but let's build a movement, and let's not concede defeat, as it were. that this is just going to be one big dark mass. There's a
Well,
sense.
we had a fantastic prayer rally, didn't we, on Wednesday,
Yeah.
the night before the election. I think we may have a picture of that we can show. Oh yes, several pictures there, so you can get a bit of the feel of what was happening there, and a joyful but also somewhat repentant event that we had, and the need for prayer has definitely not gone away. We need to, if anything, increase our prayer and pray hard into this new government and for the new MPs.
And remember, if it gets darker, so the light of Christ shines brighter.
Yeah.
And as it gets dark, there's a sense in which, if it gets still darker, there is no pretense in terms of abortion up to birth, euthanasia, and all the rest, and what's being taught in our schools, and the wholesale secularization of our culture, in a sense. If that happens, then the light of Christ will shine bright, and his people will shine bright in the midst of this chaos.
No, absolutely. I think the church needs to be bold and courageous, to be dependent on the Lord in prayer. It will be challenging. And I see a comment from Krista McCormick. I'm not sure if it's in jest about maybe God wanted Labour and Liberals. I don't think Christian Concern we've been saying the last few weeks that our hope is in whoever, Conservatives or Reform. I think we've been saying for weeks now, our hope is in Jesus Christ. And there would be concerns if the election had gone the other way, and we'd been saying about things that we need to be thinking about and praying about and how we can be engaging. Our hope is that as Christians, we would go out and proclaim that the root problem in our society is far greater and far deeper than anything our politicians can say. Actually, what we truly need is, as a nation, to turn to the Lord Jesus Christ, the one who loved the world so much that he gave his only Son, so that whoever would believe in him would not perish but have eternal life. We're seeing the fruits in our society of that rejection of Jesus. We're seeing the fruits of a society that doesn't have Jesus as the foundation, a society that doesn't value life or the family, a society that has no understanding about what real freedom really is. And so, yes, whilst it's a challenging time ahead, it will be a time of gospel opportunity. We shouldn't be naive about those challenges, and we need to be willing and ready to speak when bad legislation is being proposed, when there's legislation that is anti-God, anti-life, anti-family. But we also need to be praying for our leaders, engaging with them, as Andrea said, and continuing to do the work of proclaiming the Lordship of Christ, saying, we believe that God has instituted this government. Romans 13 is clear. But that doesn't therefore mean that this government is infallible. It means this government has a duty to submit and bend its knee to Jesus Christ, because one day he will come and bring judgment, and one day every knee will bow and tongue confess. That is our great hope. And so we as Christians need to proclaim that now. So for those who are feeling discouraged or disheartened, remember, our hope is in the Lord Jesus. Do not put your trust in princes, in a son of man in whom there is no salvation. But blessed is the one whose help is in the God of Jacob. Psalm 146. What encouraging words for us to remember. Thank you, Andrea and Tim, and all who've been joining us. This will be the last in our election special series, but do continue sharing our resources, and particularly some of our commentary on Labour and their manifesto, as we look ahead to these next few years and about how we as Christians can be faithful witnesses, can be salt and light, and so that God's name can be glorified. Thank you all so much for joining us on this week's edition of Round the Table Election Special.
Thanks, Ben.